So greetings folks, there's been the trial of the century, the trial of this century, the trial of last century perhaps, one that overshadows and eclipses the O.J. Simpson trial, which quite frankly was a little bit of a Californian pantomime, not something I was particularly interested in or engaged in. But this particular trial is absolutely fascinating because it has resonance at all different sorts of levels, as I'm going to come on to explain to you in today's vlog. It has resonance in terms of, jurisprudence, the legal system, the way defamation works, the way that jury trials operate, and how they're different from a single judge, which is extremely relevant for those interested in civil litigation, because defamation is one of the few areas, at least in the States, that still requires a jury. And I should say that it also has resonance sort of on a social level, at the highest level of society, perhaps even arguably, if it's not a little bit of hyperbole, of Western civilization, because you've got these two tides meeting of the current fashion of the Me Too movement, love it or loathe it, and you've got the ancient law, if you like, or the centuries old common law system, which, as we know, is the prevalent legal system across many of the Commonwealth and ex-Commonwealth countries, the United States obviously included, which distinguished it from the civil inquisitorial style system that you find in Europe. So I am of course talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. Hi. Hi, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Plaintiff John C. Depp II's claims against defendant Amber Laura Heard, the issues in this case are summarized below. Number one, whether Ms. Heard made or published any of the following statements. A, Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath that has to change. B, then 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. C, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse. Number two, do any of Ms. Heard's statements imply or insinuate anything about Mr. Depp? Number three, were Ms. Heard's statements seen by anyone other than Mr. Depp? Number four, did Ms. Heard's statements convey a defamatory implication to someone who saw them other than Mr. Depp? Number five, are the implications or insinuations about Mr. Depp in Ms. Heard's statements false? Number six, did Ms. Heard make the statements with actual malice? Number seven, if Mr. Depp is entitled to recover, what is the amount of Mr. Depp's damages? On these issues, Mr. Depp has the burden of proof. Your decisions on these issues must be governed by the instructions that follow.
This is going to be a vlog in which, I tell the story of the trial. I have been glued to the television, or rather the internet, over the last 6 weeks. I've watched absolutely nothing else. I've been a total legal geek because, there is no better window into the legal system, into the trial system, than this celebrity case. I'm going to, make this about general litigation because I think there's so much to learn from this case about how to approach the issue of litigation, civil litigation in the courts of England and Wales, whether you're a lawyer or whether you are a litigant in person. Because the principles that I'm going to, extrapolate, elicit out of this case are, a pretty high level and apply even though the United States system is a little bit different from the UK one.
You brought a lawsuit against the Sun in June of 2018, correct?
Yes, I brought
and that was 6 months before Miss Heard ever wrote her op-ed, correct?
I don't know.
And in the summer of 2020, there was a several-week trial in London against the Sun, correct?
Miss Heard was not a party to that trial.
Not my question, Mr. Depp. In the article that the Sun wrote that you sued over, you sued for Mr. Wooten calling you a wife beater, correct?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained. Next question.
Mr. Depp, Mr. Rottenborn asked you some questions. questions about the UK trial. Why do you feel that this is the first time that you've actually had an opportunity to tell your story and, as you said, get the load off your back?
As the UK trial was me suing Dan Wooten and the Sun for defamation for calling me a wife beater. The UK have there are different laws, there are different ways they handle things. There are also limitations in evidence. Everything is quite boxed in with regard to what can be said, what can be spoken about. So Ms. Heard provided information to the Sun as their star witness, but the case was not brought against Ms. Heard, it was brought against the Sun.
Perhaps the most interesting thing about this trial, if you're a lawyer, is the fact that you've already had a trial in the United Kingdom 2 years ago, in 2020. Yeah? And you're now having a trial in the US. Now, of course, they have got different parties. In the United Kingdom, you had Johnny Depp as the claimant, but you had the Sun newspaper as the defendant. Amber Heard was not a party to those proceedings, which is quite interesting and quite relevant from the point of view of disclosure, because she was just a third party. She was just a witness rocking up at that trial. It was a 2-week trial. This one's been 6 weeks. And she was just rocking up, you know, called by the Sun to give evidence that what the Sun had published in its newspapers about Johnny Depp being a wife beater was true. And it's quite interesting that, because there are different rules as requires a main party, the defendant or the claimant, to disclose documents in the run-up to the trial. Disclosure is a big part, or discovery if you in the United States is a big part of legal proceedings. There are different rules governing the claimant, the defendant, and a third party who's just sort of dragged into the proceedings to give evidence. So there's an interesting question mark over there over whether or not the judge, Mr. Justice Nicol, actually had all the evidence at his disposal when it came to make judgment. Because the other interesting thing about this from a legal point of view is the fact that in the UK, we have got rid of jury trials in defamation cases. You might be surprised to hear that, because it's only quite a recent innovation. And you had a judge presiding over the proceedings in 2020 in the High Court, World Courts of Justice on the Strand, yeah? He was listening to all the evidence, a lot of which, although not all obviously, has been duplicated in the United States, a fair amount of it. So he was the one running the show, and he was the one actually also making the decision. And, you know, and he delivered quite a hefty judgment there. I don't know how many pages it is, but it runs to, I don't know, 60 page odd judgment, yeah? And most interestingly of all, and just to tell you my story and the door I opened into this whole celebrity trial was, you know, I was at first thinking, while Amber Heard, she presents as somewhat histrionic, Johnny Depp probably a bit of an oddball, probably angry, rage-fueled, and slightly sort of an eccentric Hunter Day Thompson kind of, what's the word? He certainly, you know, loved his literature. He's clearly an actor, and well, a pair of them are a couple of oddballs. But Amber Heard, yeah, I'm not sure I buy it. Yeah, I'm not sure I buy it. Then I looked at the judgment in the UK trial 2 years ago, and my goodness gracious me, you know, there were 14 offences particularised in that judgment. 14 incidents, and, you know, wide-ranging evidence, certainly in the pleadings, wide-ranging details on really quite outrageous, quite violent, quite a lot of it had a lot of rather ugly detail about grabbing her by the hair, dragging her around rooms, punching her repeatedly when she was on her back, in the back of her head. He's got loads of rings on his hand, blood on the lips, and then in Australia, the famous incident which was described in the particulars as 3-day hostage situation out in the outback somewhere, in which he basically kicked the living bells out of her. And then, having laid out all the details, the judge goes on to consider the evidence and to find for Amber Heard. He found in, I think it was 12 or at least 11 of the 14 incidents, certainly the most serious ones, for Amber Heard. And those where he didn't find for her, he just felt there was insufficient evidence to make a judgment. Now look, this is, you can watch the media outlets, for goodness gracious sake, the world is awash with opinions, yeah? Don't forget newspapers are there to sell newspapers, yeah? Media's there to get you glued. Please, 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 if you're a self-respecting individual, let alone if you're a lawyer, don't gobble up the nonsense that's swilling around online or in print, okay? So you've got to take this judgment seriously. This Mr. Justice Nicol is a seasoned veteran. He a very experienced judge, written the book on defamation, or one of them, and he systematically and forensically went through all the evidence that had been presented to him, and listened to certainly most, if not all, of the key witnesses that appeared in the High Court in London, also appeared in the UK. So key witnesses. It's not as if he was missing a lot of evidence, and he forensically dissects the witnesses and the evidence that Depp's lawyers put forward, and convinced me. Yeah, and by the end, I was like, because I quite like Johnny Depp as an actor and as a character. And I think Amber Heard's a bit, extreme histrionic girl.
Look at him one more time. Wanting to penetrate the monster to see the man that I love underneath that. The man I loved. No one said anything. No one did anything. It was like you could hear a pin drop on that plane. You could feel the tension, but no one did anything. And I just remember feeling so embarrassed. I felt so embarrassed that he could kick me to the ground in front of people. And more embarrassing, I didn't know what to do about it. I got up and I walked to the front of the plane. I sat down and I just looked out of the window.
Did there come a time that you tape recorded Mr. Depp on this plane?
All right, so that's how I came into this situation. Of course, now what's so fascinating is you've now got 2 years later. I mean, these proceedings in the United States were actually issued, I think, in 2018. A rerun, if you like. Okay. The other, I think, really important and relevant thing about it is, of course, that when Johnny Depp sued The Sun, he was just going after the gutter press, But here you've got an op-ed, as it's called, which is Amber Heard giving her name in first person in 2018, publishing it in the Washington Post newspaper in December 2018, in which she is saying, I'm the victim of domestic abuse. In fact, I'm the victim of violent sexual attacks And of course, the Washington Post lawyers and the organization that actually brought the article forward to the Washington Post on behalf of Amber Heard, which is the organization, you know, which represents those who've been sexually abused and domestic violence as a charity. You know, they worked very hard to make sure that they could make the article as watertight as possible. So they she didn't explicitly mention Johnny Depp, of course. She talks about 2 years ago, I became the mouthpiece for domestic violence and saw how Hollywood, you know, makes it very difficult for those who want to speak out. And of course, in 2018, the Me Too movement was full throttle, whereas when the abuse occurred between 2012, 13 and 16, and when she walked into a family court in California and got her TRO, restraining order on Johnny Depp, on the 27th of May 2016, the Me Too movement hadn't got a grip at that point, It was there, but it hadn't gone viral as it was to subsequently. So, you know, the article basically is cleverly written. I think one of the interesting things about it is, and I'll come on to this when I talk about the law, okay, because I think this is very relevant for litigants in person, because they often get a bit too tangled up in the law, is that the article, you know, Amber Heard's lawyers made a lot in closing arguments of the fact that, you know, you've got to make sure that Amber Heard is the publisher of, you know, a factually accurate article that names Johnny Depp, you know, that is associated with him, that he's defaming him. And you've also got to find that there has been malice, which doesn't mean the malice in the ordinary sense, like spiteful, wicked intent. It means that, you know, you know it to be false, or you're reckless as to whether or not it's true.
The only reference to sexual assault in the article, and you can read the op-ed, is sexual assault that she said she had experienced by the time she was of college age, before Mr. Depp. So there is a reference to sexual violence in that article, but it's not by Mr. Depp. And Mr. Depp can't hold her liable for a headline she didn't write, that contained something that was not about him. And they want you to think that she republished the headline by tweeting out the link to the online version. So let's look at this. This is the tweet that she sent on December 19th. The hyperlink says, opinion Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence. That's the online version of the article. As Ms. Heard said, you can't tweet a piece of paper. So when she wanted to share that she had written this article, what choice does she have? She has to attach that link. And the jury instructions that you have make clear that a hyperlink is not republication. Forwarding a link on does not mean that you broadcast the statement again, but that's what they want to make you think.
One for the lawyers here, we get tangled up in the law and make and I don't think this issue will be very relevant, particularly in a jury trial, which, as I say, makes it so fascinating. Because the jury, you see, can look kind of beyond the facts to they can start to take a wider view. They can do unusual things. They could, for example, find for Johnny Depp, even though they felt that some of the allegations of domestic abuse, physical violence, are made out factually, because they may feel that she was a provocateur, and that Johnny Depp has paid his price. His career's been destroyed in the last 6 years. So you can have some interesting judgments come up. What you've got in the UK trial is a judge who actually has to, or rather a claimant who does not, which is typically the case in civil proceedings, in a civil trial, have the burden of proof on their shoulders. So in the UK, Johnny Depp's lawyers doesn't have to prove beyond reasonable doubt on the balance of probabilities that the violence didn't occur. It was for the defendant, having made an allegedly false statement, the burden was on them to prove that, on the balance of probabilities, that the assault happened. Whereas in the US trial, the burden, and that's just the peculiarities of the two legal systems as far as defamation is concerned, the claimant has the burden.
Number 6, did Ms. Heard make the statements with actual malice? Number 7, if Mr. Depp is entitled to recover, what is the amount of Mr. Depp's damages? On these issues, Mr. Depp has the burden of proof.
So the claimant has to, for example, prove, it's the same yardstick really, more likely than not, that the abuse did not occur. Now that's quite a tall order, and as I say, if you've read the analysis, if you've analysed the judgment of Mr. Justice Nicol, you may be wondering how on earth Johnny Depp could win. For all her faults, it does appear, if you look at the judgment, that Johnny Depp did, even if only sporadically on the odd occasion, hit her. Yeah. And therefore, the article is made out, isn't it? You're a woman, you've been hit by a man in a relationship. The statement in the Washington Post that that she became the mouthpiece of domestic abuse 2 years ago, which connects it with 2016 proceedings when she got the restraining order, is a true statement because there was domestic violence. Whether or not there was sexual violence, because the title is the only place that mentions sexual violence, and apparently the title was written by the editors at the Washington Post. Amber Heard has nothing to do with it. I think it's probably quite likely, but nevertheless, there's her photo, there's her name, and interestingly, in respect of the title, she republished a tweet. And again, Amber Heard's lawyers have made much of the fact that, just passing on a link to an online article is not publication for purposes of defamation. Yeah, Johnny Depp should be going after the Washington Post, and he's not, and he's got a problem with that.
Let's talk about the headline for a minute. The headline that was published in the online version only of the article on December 18th, 2018, said, "I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath." A few points here. Number one, and this evidence is undisputed. There's no dispute about this. So as you weigh the evidence, you don't have to check your common sense at the door, and you can weigh circumstantial evidence, you can weigh facts, but you can't see evidence where no evidence exists. And the undisputed evidence here is that Ms. Heard didn't write the headline, she didn't approve the headline, she had nothing to do with it, she was not given notice of the headline. She testified, you saw her testify about the sexual assault that she experienced at the hands of Mr. Depp. You saw her testify about that they're calling her a liar. You saw her on the stand testify with your own mouth, with her own mouth, exactly what she went through for the first time in court, because people who have suffered that, they don't want to broadcast that to the world. They want to penalize Ms. Heard for not speaking about that earlier. That's ridiculous, and it's insulting, and it's just victim blaming at its most disgusting. The only reference to sexual assault in the article, and you can read the op-ed, is sexual assault that she said she had experienced by the time she was of college age, before Mr. Depp. So there is a reference to sexual violence in that article, but it's not by Mr. Depp. And Mr. Depp can't hold her liable for a headline she didn't write that contained something that was not about him.
I don't buy Amber Heard's lawyers' arguments on that, because Amber Heard added some content of her own when she retweeted or tweeted the article. She added content, and actually in Virginia law or US law, I'm not sure if it's the same across all states, but certainly in Virginia, you can be guilty of republication if you've added content to an article that you have sent on to others, to a fresh audience, if you like. And she did. She owned the article. She said, you know, I'm a champion from college campuses to, you know, to boardrooms. And she was guilty, or she was certainly opportunistic in getting that article released on the eve of the release of a major blockbuster, Aquaman, in which she had a biggest film to date. It's no coincidence the timing of the publication of the Washington Post article. So there's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour around the legal issues and elements in the case. I'll just finally say that, you know, unlike the O.J. Simpson trial, which was held in, you know, that pantomime state, California, this was held in Virginia. I think there's something reassuring about that. You kind of feel that there's more likely to be regular folk who aren't totally infected by, you know, all the movements that are washing through California at the moment. Quite frankly, the law should be beyond, you know, the changing seas of fashion and the political correctness. And I think, therefore, it's quite healthy that the trial's taken place in Virginia. Amber Heard's lawyers did try and get it moved to California, of course, because, you know, it's quite interesting. In California, for instance, you can be found guilty of abuse simply by smashing up furniture. In Virginia, you can't. You know, you can be found guilty of assault, certainly, simply by smashing up furniture. So different states have different laws. And, you know, for my money, California's just gone way off the charts in terms of its political correctness at all different levels, and there's this massive erosion of society over there. Do I need to say it, you know, I support, you know, action taken against men who abuse women? Well, you know, the very fact that I kind of need to say that in a vlog to you, I mean, what does that say about society, that you feel you have to declare that you're on the side of those who are against violence? And if you don't say anything, if you keep silent, then you're complicit with the violence. It's the same with the Black Lives Matter movement, isn't it? There's something unhealthy and unwholesome about that level of insane political correctness. And the same thing happened with the coronavirus, where you were, you know, a complicit granny killer if you didn't snitch on your neighbour who wasn't self-isolating for 6 weeks. God bless the Australians.
I receive hundreds of death threats regularly, if not daily. Thousands since this trial has started, people mocking my testimony about being assaulted, making fun of my...
Objection, relevance, non-responsive.
Goes to damages.